It's been quite some time since an American manufacturer has tried to compete head-on in the full-size luxury sedan category with the BMW 7 Series, Audi A8, and Mercedes-Benz S-Class. But that is exactly what Cadillac is doing with this all-new 2017 CT6. What makes the CT6 very different than the Lincoln Continental, the Cadillac XTS, the Cadillac DTS, or a variety of Cadillacs that have come before this is that this is a rear-wheel drive vehicle. Although the model we're driving has a twin-turbo V6 under the hood and all-wheel drive, the dynamics of this vehicle are very, very different than the other Cadillac luxury sedans that have come before this. Also very different than the Lincoln Continental. Without a doubt, there are some excellent vehicles out there with transverse engine designs, but a transverse engine design does limit a few things, and one of those things is high-end power. This has a 400 horsepower twin-turbo V6 under the hood, and we do expect to see a nearly 500 horsepower twin-turbo V8 coming very soon, and you're unlikely to find one of those in a transverse engined vehicle. The CT6 is instantly recognizable as a Cadillac with this angular design language, the slight pipe that runs right here through the full LED headlamps that are standard, and of course we have well-integrated front parking sensors. If you were hoping the CT6 would be an absolutely enormous American land yacht, then you may be a little bit disappointed. However, at 204 inches long, this is definitely a large vehicle for the United States. In terms of comparisons, this is 9 inches longer than a Cadillac CTS, about 3 inches shorter than a Mercedes-Benz S-Class. That means that the CT6 is overall a little bit smaller than the BMW 7 Series, which is brand new, the Audi A8 in long wheelbase form, and just a hair shorter than the Lexus LS 460L. This is, however, just about the same size as the Genesis G90, although the overall style and proportions of the vehicle belie this vehicle's large size. It's really noticeable when you really take a good look at the front of the vehicle. That hood is an awful lot longer than it seems. That's because this vehicle was designed not just for the twin-turbo V6 that we have under this hood, but also for twin-turbo V8s in the future. Most of the extra length that we see in the European competition goes right back here to the rear doors. You'll notice this door is definitely a little bit shorter than what we see in the Mercedes or the BMW or the long wheelbase Audi. However, it is definitely longer than something like a Cadillac CTS. The other area where we see a little bit of a size difference is the trunk, because this does have a smaller trunk lid and a smaller trunk overall than some of those European options. The rear end of the CT6 is styled very much like the rest of the Cadillac family. We have the crease right here that we see in the other Cadillac models, although it's a little bit less pronounced in the CT6. We have these large brake lamp modules. They also function as the turn signals and the parking lamps. You'll find the backup light right down here in the middle of the bumper. Under the hood, we find a variety of different engines, but these engines are not quite like what we see in the European competition, because the CT6 starts out with a 2-liter 4-cylinder engine. That engine is, of course, turbocharged and produces 265 horsepower. Because the CT6 is so light, performance with that 4-cylinder turbocharged engine is actually very good for this segment. Next up, we have a 3.6-liter naturally aspirated V6 engine, which is also unusual for this segment. That engine features direct injection as well as cylinder deactivation. It produces 335 horsepower, but actually a little bit less torque than that 2-liter turbo. Next up, we have this 3-liter twin turbocharged 6-cylinder engine. This is not the same engine that we see in the Cadillac CTS V Sport. This is actually a brand new engine for the CT6. And if that's not enough oomph for you, there will be a twin-turbo 4.2-liter V8 engine coming next year. All engines are mated to a standard 8-speed automatic transmission. If you get the 2-liter engine, then it starts out as a rear-wheel drive vehicle, but if you get either of the V6s, then all-wheel drive becomes standard. Thanks to the light curb weight, fuel economy is excellent, especially in that 2-liter turbocharged model, which will average 25 miles per gallon in the new 2017 EPA cycle. Front seat comfort is excellent. We're in the top end model, which means we do get the articulating seat back. You can see it's actually getting a little bit closer to me right there in the shoulder area. The seat controls are located on the door, so they're a little bit far away for me to use on the camera there. But we also have a 4-way tilt telescopic steering column. We have an optional seat massage feature. This is actually one of the better seat massages available in the luxury segment, although we don't have an anti-fatigue seat bottom. When it comes to our overall seat comfort score, I'm going to give this 9 out of 10 points because the headrests don't move quite as far up as I'd like. They do hit me right in the middle of the back. One nice touch in the Cadillac is that the passenger seat has the same range of motion as the driver's seat. That's different than we see in the Genesis G90. The passenger seat never gets the same range of motion as the driver. That makes this a little bit more similar to the average European entry. The model that we're driving this week has the available power rear seats that also offer a massage function, very much like the front seats, and ventilation as well as heating. Although legroom is generous in the CT6 thanks to its overall length, we don't have quite as much room back here as we'd find in some of those longer vehicles in this segment. We also don't have as much headroom because of the overall very swoopy, sexy profile that we find in this car. So if I sit upright in the seat back, my head is touching the ceiling. Now if I move over to the middle seat, it's a little bit more pronounced, as we see in most vehicles, because of course the outboard seats are very bucket shaped. And the legroom figures become very obvious if I move over to the right side of the vehicle where this front seat was all the way back in its tracks. I've about 3 inches of legroom left. That's definitely more than we see in a Cadillac CTS, but less than you'd find in something like an Audi A8L. When it comes to cargo space, the CT6 falls a little bit behind the competition. We have 15.3 cubic feet of storage space right back here, which puts this just behind the Genesis G90, and notably behind the 7 Series or the Mercedes-Benz S-Class. However, you will find a slightly smaller trunk in the Audi A8. That means that when it comes to our 24-inch bag score, I was only able to fit 4 of these roller bags right back here in the cargo area, which is exactly the same score that the Genesis G90 got. However, if you do get something like a 7 Series or an S-Class, you can get 1 more of these 24-inch roller bags right back here in the cargo area. Unlike Cadillacs of the past, if we pull up the cargo area load floor, we just find a compact spare tire. A nice touch in the trunk is that Cadillac has placed 5 LEDs right back here by the rear bumper that shine into the trunk, illuminating the load much better than the average trunk light in a full-size sedan. When it comes to our exclusive trunk comfort score, this scores 7 out of 10 points. We lose a few points for not having a full-size spare tire and for overall having a smaller cargo area than the average in this segment. The opening is a little bit larger than I had expected, but it is still a little smaller than some of those large full-size European options. We have a nice helper handle right here on the trunk lid to help you close it, and of course, an available power trunk lid. As we take a look around the interior, keep in mind that we are in one of the top-end trims with nearly every option. So we have the dual-pane sunroof, the rear sunshades right there. Our model also has the rear seat entertainment system. The LCDs pop up out of the front seat backs. We have 4-way adjustable headrests. We press this button, move them in and out and up and down. One thing worth noting is that if you're a taller person, this may hit you right between the shoulder blades like it does me. The driver and front passenger get height adjustable seat belts. We also have heated and ventilated seats in this particular CT6. If we move on over to the front door panels, you'll find a majority of soft touch plastics, although we do find some hard plastics right there at the bottom of the B-pillar in the vehicle. Plenty of real wood trim going on, and then we find some sort of Mercedes-like seat controls right over here on the doors. The main controls are fairly self-explanatory, the seat back and the seat bottom cushion. To change the seat back articulation, the lumbar support, the massage control, as well as the extending seat bottom cushion, you use this 4-way button right here with the toggle in the middle. The toggle chooses the option you want to adjust, and the 4 buttons adjust that option. The small button right by the seat back is how we enable or disable the massage functionality. You'll see that we do have a 2-position front passenger seat memory right below that. The model we're driving features not only plenty of real wood trim, but also a faux suede headliner, full leather dashboard, and full leather doors. Again, more of that real wood trim right over here on the dashboard, perforated leather separating this trim panel from the infotainment cluster right over there, carbon fiber right below that, and then we find a fairly large glove compartment on the passenger side. We have not only a bin right down here, which was able to accommodate an iPad, but 2 small shelves just above that. General Motors has been aggressive at bringing Apple CarPlay and Android Auto down to a wide variety of their models, the CT6 included. This uses the latest generation of Cadillac Q, their infotainment system, which we've seen in other Cadillac models before, but with a much larger screen. We still have a variety of touch controls. The home button, the volume slider right across the bottom, and the mute button are all touch buttons, as well as the glove box button right over there, parking sensor enable disable, the self-parking button, and the automatic start-stop enable disable button for the engine. In addition to the typical infotainment screens, climate control options, we also have some XM satellite data connected options like our weather report here and OnStart integration. The car that we're driving has a 360-degree camera system. We can select between front and rear views, and you can also have the system record events to an event recorder built into the system. That's a pretty new option for the US. Below the infotainment screen, we find 2 large air vents and the controls for the front 2 zones of the climate control system. If you want to control the rear zone from the front, you do have to use the touchscreen LCD. This is also where you'll find the controls to the heated seats. We can either heat just the seat back or the seat back and bottom cushion, or we can enable the seat ventilation. Continuing down from there, we have a fairly traditional console shifter. We have drive and then a manual mode all the way to the back that enables the use of the shift paddles on the back of the steering column. To the right of the shifter, we find 2 cup holders. These are a little bit smaller than I had expected out of an American car, but I was still able to fit large sodas in them. Continuing back from that, we have an auto brake hold button. We have a traction control enable disable button and a drive mode selection button that allows us to choose between tour, sport, and snow and ice. We have a small storage cubby right there where we can insert a smartphone right there like that iPhone 7. And then in front of that we have a very new feature for Cadillac CUE. This is a touchpad controller, very much like we have seen in certain Lexus models. There's an illuminated back button right there. The touch controller operates very much like a trackpad on a laptop or a mouse on a desktop computer. This is not my favorite input method. I have to say that I much prefer the touch screen that we find in the dashboard. The touchscreen is the one thing that separates this from the Lexus systems, because when Lexus gives you a touchpad, they no longer allow you to touch the screen. The center console armrest opens from either side to reveal a small storage cubby where we can put wallets, smartphones, things like that. We have 2 USB inputs and an auxiliary input right there. The smartphone area right here is partially covered by the center console lid, and it also offers available wireless charging. Cadillac has long produced one of the best LCD instrument clusters in the business, and this is the 2nd generation version of their LCD instrument cluster system. The display is controlled via a 5-button array on the steering wheel, and it allows us to choose between 2 different layouts. Unfortunately, we don't have quite as many layouts as we did have in the 1st generation of Cadillac's LCD instrument cluster, but this gives us still a much wider variety of options than we see in any of the other luxury competition. For instance, if we take a look at certain European luxury options, we can really only choose between a few different options in the layout, and this display allows us a very wide degree of customization. We can have, for instance, our turbo boost gauge on one side, fuel economy on the other, the night vision screen right here in the middle if we so choose. We also get not only audio information, but you can also actually browse your media device and choose playlists, artists, genres, etc. right here within the instrument cluster. The steering wheel is a 4-spoke design. We have shift paddles on the back of the wheel, down on the left, up on the right. We also have a real wood trim strip running right there across the wheel. On the bottom spokes, we find the buttons for our heated steering wheel, lane keeping assist, the distance for the radar adaptive cruise control system. This also adjusts the distance for the pre-collision warning system. On the other side, we find track forward and backward. On the left side of the wheel, we have the voice command button, phone hang-up button, and then the controls for our cruise control system. On the right side of the wheel, we find this 5-button array that controls the multifunction LCD instrument cluster. And then we also have volume up and down further to the right. Although this looks like a traditional rearview mirror at the moment, if we flip this little lever right down here, it doesn't dim the rearview mirror, it actually turns on the camera view to the rear. This is using an entirely different camera than the backup camera in the vehicle, and it's trying to give us a more rearview mirror-like view. But you'll notice it's much wider. We can actually see the corner of the shed right over here, and if I flip to the mirror-only view, you can't see the corner of the shed right here because it's actually quite a bit off the screen. One thing worth noting about this rear view camera system is that you'll notice it takes the camera just a little while to refocus on the screen. There's a reason for that, because optically the camera is focusing right now about 2 feet in front of it, and if I click this to the other direction, it's now focusing about 50 feet in front of the camera. And this is exactly what your eyes have to do when you take a look at this LCD versus the mirror. The rear out of this rear view mirror camera is different than the view that we see out of the backup camera in the vehicle, because they are actually 2 different cameras. You can see that the backup camera has more of a fisheye style to it. You can actually see the entire shed as well as the bumper on the back of the car, and right up here it is wider in format but does not cover quite the same real estate that the backup camera does. The first thing you'll notice about the CT6 out on the road is how much this drives like a smaller car. Out on the road, this feels an awful lot more like a Cadillac CTS than a Mercedes-Benz S-Class. Whether or not that's a good thing to you really depends on what you expect out of a full-size luxury sedan. If you want a larger vehicle with a bigger back seat, but you want it to handle impeccably, then this is exactly the car for you. Because without a doubt, the CT6 is not only one of the best handling vehicles in this segment, this has absolutely hands down the best handling feel. Keep in mind, we are driving the top-end twin-turbo version with the ferromagnetic suspension system, and we also have the 4-corner steering system. The big difference between the CT6 and every other entry in this segment, including the Jaguar XJ, which up till this point was one of the best handling entries in the segment, is how nimble the CT6 feels. The overall handling feel of the CTS confused me for just a second when I first got behind the wheel. I actually had to go back up and look up the overall size of this vehicle to really tell what was going on here. The light curb weight obviously plays into the athletic feeling of the CT6. However, there's more going on here. It's very obvious that Cadillac deliberately tuned this vehicle overall to be the sportiest entry in the segment. Now let's go to the numbers. We ran from 0 to 60 in 5 seconds even with this twin-turbo V6 model. Keep in mind that all twin-turbo V6s are all-wheel drive only. Actually, all V6 models in the CT6 are all-wheel drive only at this point. If you want a rear-wheel drive CT6, you do have to get the base 2-liter engine right now. Because of the light curb weight in the CT6, acceleration is still very respectable in that base 2-liter model. It'll go from 0 to 60 in about 6.1 seconds. The delta between the naturally aspirated V6 and that 2-liter turbo is fairly small. In our quick test in a dealer-provided model, we ran from 0 to 60 just about 1/10 of a second faster in the V6 model. Keep in mind that the V6 not only adds weight, but it also adds a little bit loss with that standard all-wheel drive system. Keeping in mind that we are driving the heaviest version of the CT6, the braking score is very, very impressive. We ran from 60 miles an hour back to 0 in 109 feet, which is incredibly short for a full-size luxury sedan. In fact, there are mid-size luxury sedans that will not stop as quickly as this vehicle. When it comes to handling, there's absolutely no question the CT6 is an incredible corner carver. In fact, you have to be a little bit careful in this vehicle because the overall size of the vehicle, the overall polish of the vehicle makes it seem like you're going slower than you actually are, and you can cut corners in this vehicle faster than you'd think a full-size luxury sedan should. The excellent handling is thanks not just to the light curb weight, but also the excellent suspension design. The model we're driving also has that Magna Ride suspension, and of course the fact that we have 4-corner steering in this vehicle. The 4-corner steering not only makes this vehicle turn tighter in parking lot situations, but also improves the feel out here on winding mountain roads. Now, if I were to switch this drive mode to the Sport mode, right now we have been in Tour, then the system will actually send a little bit more power to the rear of the vehicle. In Tour mode, the CT6 puts about 60% of the power to the rear, about 40% up front. But if you put it in Sport mode, it's trying to send about 80% of the power to the rear, about 20% up front. Of course, if there is wheel slip, the system will send power wherever it's needed. As I frequently say, ride and handling are two ends of the teeter-totter. And this is an area where the CT6 falls behind the rest of the competition, because the BMW 7 Series in its latest version, definitely the Mercedes-Benz S-Class, and the Audi A8 favor a very polished ride. If you get a Lexus LS in upper-end trims, it also comes with a standard air ride suspension, and it's going to make it feel a little bit floaty-boaty compared to what we find in the CT6. This CT6 may be a large rear-wheel drive Cadillac, but this does not drive like your father's Fleetwood. When you start throwing this Cadillac in corners, the body is incredibly stable. We get very little tip and dive, very little body roll, and we also have a lot more road feel coming through the chassis and through the steering column than you find in your average large luxury sedan. No matter what mode you put this suspension in, you will feel more of the road imperfections in this cabin than in any other full-size luxury sedan. While that obviously lowers the ride score, it seriously improves the handling feel and handling ability of the CT6. Even though the CT6 has a firm suspension and a sporting mission in mind, the cabin is very, very quiet, as you'd expect out of a luxury sedan. We scored 70 decibels at 50 miles an hour, which puts this right in the thick of things in the full-size segment. Reducing curb weight in a vehicle not only improves the driving dynamics, it also improves the fuel economy. We've been averaging 21.9 miles per gallon over a week of very mixed driving in this vehicle, and that's above the 2017 EPA's estimate. If you treat this vehicle gently, it's pretty easy to get 23-24 miles per gallon as long as you don't live in a mountainous area. Keep in mind that that 21.9 mile per gallon score does include going up and over a 2,200-foot mountain pass and 0 to 60 acceleration testing this vehicle. It's fairly unusual for a full-size luxury sedan to get fuel economy scores over the high teens or perhaps about 20 miles per gallon, but this beats that by nearly 2 miles per gallon. This is definitely more fuel efficient than the average entry in this segment, except for the hybrid entries. Most vehicles in this segment, if you want better fuel economy than this, you will have to shell out for the manufacturer's hybrid option. My bottom line on the road for the CT6 is that if you're looking for a full-size luxury sedan that is hands down the most fun to drive, look no further than the CT6. There is very little competition for this vehicle in the way that this drives. The closest really would be something like the Jaguar XJ, but even it feels bigger and heavier than the CT6 that we're driving. For 2017, the CT6 starts at $53,795. That is one of the least expensive entries in this segment. But keep in mind that the CT6 starts out with that 2-liter 4-cylinder turbocharged engine. Although acceleration with the base 4-cylinder engine is acceptable thanks to the light curb weight, it's not going to be as refined as the 6-cylinder or 8-cylinder engines that the competition starts with. The other thing you need to keep in mind about the CT6 is the overall mission of this particular Cadillac. Cadillac has made a very sporty entry in the full-size sedan segment, but they have not decided to make a full-on extra-large land yacht entry in this segment. So the CT6 doesn't really directly compete with the Mercedes-Benz S-Class because the S-Class is going after a very different feel. In addition to that, the CT6 is not quite as long as some of the long-wheelbase full-size luxury sedans. There have been a lot of rumors about why the CT6 is sized the way that it is. Some people are expecting to see a Cadillac CT8 that would be even larger than the CT6, even more luxurious, and a more direct competitor to the long wheelbase entries in this segment, leaving the CT6 to compete with the short wheelbase entries in this segment. However, recent news out of General Motors seems to indicate that the CT8 may not happen at this point. While we wait for news on the CT8 coming up, we do have those 3 different engines to choose from at the moment in the CT6, and we also have an upcoming twin-turbo V8. The Platinum trim is where you'll find all the gee-whiz features that people have been talking about. The radar adaptive cruise control, that's also where we'll find the semi-autonomous driving system that Cadillac should be releasing very soon, the 34-speaker Bose audio system, the night vision system, 20-inch wheels, active rear wheel steering, which helps improve not only the turning radius in tight maneuvers, but also handling out on your favorite winding mountain road. You'll also get the 20-way power front seats, the 8-way power rear seats, and all 4 seats in the CT6 Massage. Let's start out our comparison section with the 2017 Genesis G90. Over at facebook.com/AlexandAutos, this was easily the top pick that you wanted us to compare the CT6 to. The biggest difference between the Cadillac and the Genesis is their overall mission. With the CT6, Cadillac is definitely trying to make the sportiest large luxury sedan available. It's very obvious with the way the CT6 drives. The suspension is firmer, the overall vehicle is more dynamic, more engaging, more driver-focused than any of the other large luxury sedans. The G90, however, is very different. It's trying to be a very plush ride. It's trying to be the ultimate Lexus. The CT6 starts less expensive than the Genesis G90. The G90 starts at $68,100, but it has a surprisingly narrow price range because it tops out at $72,200 for the all-wheel drive V8 model. The least expensive CT6 with the twin-turbo V6 engine compares fairly well to the base Genesis G90. However, you will notice that there are a few features missing on the Cadillac that you get standard on the Genesis. So the Genesis effectively is a few $1,000s less expensive than a comparable CT6. Although you won't find all of the same features on the Genesis G90 in its top-end trim that you will find in the Cadillac CT6 when it is fully loaded, the CT6 is going to be about $18,000 more expensive than the Genesis. Although a $90,000 price tag on a Cadillac may shock some of you out there, it's important to keep in mind that $90,000 in the full-size luxury sedan segment is really not that unusual. In fact, a Mercedes-Benz S-Class doesn't even start until $97,500, and by the time you've added most of the goodies and gadgets that you would expect to find on a large luxury sedan, you'll be around $120,000 very easily. And oddly enough, that brings us right to the 2017 Lexus LS, because at $72,500, it is one of the less expensive classic full-size luxury sedans in this category. At this point in time, the current Lexus LS is getting a little bit long in the tooth. It's available only with their naturally aspirated V8 engine or the V8 hybrid system. Although the driving dynamics in the LS are excellent, the CT6 is definitely superior. I also like the feature set that we find in the top-end trims of the CT6 better than what we would find in a comparable Lexus LS. However, perhaps because of the lower starting price in the CT6, we do find a few plastics in the cabin that are out of place for this particular category, especially at a $90,000 price point, and we don't see that in the Lexus LS. Although I would say that the Lexus LS is perhaps just one semi-step behind the Genesis G90 at this time. Of course, that is the old Lexus LS, and the brand new Lexus LS has just recently been announced for 2018. It's going to be larger, longer, more luxurious than ever, and more expensive than ever. It's also going to have a brand new twin-turbo V6 engine standard under the hood. The current generation V8 Lexus LS is definitely slower than the twin-turbo V6 that we find in the CT6. The new twin-turbo engine in the Lexus LS and their brand new 10-speed automatic transmission is supposed to be about half a second faster, and that's just going to be the starting engine in the new LS. Now expect to pay a great deal more for the refinement that we will be finding in the brand new LS, because based on the pricing that we're seeing in the new LC500, which is essentially the coupe version of the Lexus LS, I expect the new LS500 to be at least $90,000 starting. There was a time where the 7 Series was the less expensive, more driver-focused entry in the full-size luxury sedan segment, but those days really are behind us because the brand new 7 Series is softer, more luxurious, and more comfortable than ever before. It also is a little bit more isolated from the driver than ever before. Coupled with that, the 7 Series has also become more expensive. It now starts at $81,500 for the 6-cylinder turbocharged version. If you want the 750, it will be significantly more expensive. When it comes to acceleration, the 740i will be faster than the 2-liter 4-cylinder CT6 or the 3.6-liter V6 CT6, but it's not going to be quite as fast as the 3-liter twin-turbo model that we've been driving this week. But the CT6 at this point is not a direct competitor to the 750. That's where we expect to see Cadillac's new twin-turbo V8 slot in their lineup. Handling comparisons can be a little bit tricky in this segment because there are so many different tire options that you can select, and tires have a big impact on the road holding ability of a vehicle. The CT6 is unquestionably nimble and direct feeling out on the road, but you may actually hold the road a little bit better in certain 7 Series models. If, however, you put the same tires on your Cadillac as on the BMW 7 Series, the CT6 really is going to be the handling winner. Last up, we have the Mercedes-Benz E-Class, which may confuse a few of you because in theory the CTS is the competitor for the Mercedes-Benz E-Class. However, I actually think it's interesting to compare and contrast the E-Class to the CT6. The pricing structure of the CT6 and the E-Class are not that far off, and the E-Class has a reputation of being a slightly shrunken S-Class. Like the Cadillac CT6, the E-Class starts out with a 2-liter 4-cylinder engine, and there is a twin-turbo V6 available as well. The twin-turbo V6 in the Mercedes-Benz E-Class starts at $72,400, which is fairly expensive for a turbo 6-cylinder engine in the mid-size luxury sedan category, but it's just about in line with where we see the CT6's twin-turbo start. Primarily thanks to the new Mercedes-Benz automatic transmission, the E43 AMG is going to be faster 0 to 60 than the CT6. It's about half a second faster. However, again, keep in mind that we will be seeing that twin-turbo V8 version of the CT6 coming soon. In terms of overall driving dynamics, the CT6 and the E43 remind me a great deal of one another, because the E43 is a sporty entry in the mid-size sedan segment, but not the sports entry. And what I mean by that is that Mercedes-Benz still has the E63, and the E63 is the absolutely insane Mercedes-Benz E-Class. The E43 is sort of the slightly more sensible, sporty Mercedes-Benz E-Class. The suspension tuning in the E43 is definitely firmer than your regular Mercedes E-Class, however it's not as hardcore as the E63. Likewise, the suspension in the CT6 is very firm for a full-size luxury sedan, but it's only a little bit firmer than the average mid-size luxury sedan, so the E43 and CT6 suspension tuning are actually quite similar. While I do have a little bit of a problem wrapping my head around the CT6 being a direct Mercedes-Benz S-Class competitor, I think it's an excellent step up from the Mercedes-Benz E-Class. Because for a relatively similar price, you give up very little in terms of handling or acceleration, but you get a much more comfortable back seat. My top pick in the full-size luxury sedan segment under $95,000 continues to be the Genesis G90. It's an absolutely excellent buy. But if you're looking for the most fun in this segment, then look no further than the Cadillac CT6. It is an absolute hoot to drive, which is not something you can say of your average full-size luxury sedan. My only real complaint with the CT6, and the reason that the CT6 does not edge out the Genesis G90 in my mind, is the pricing structure. I think it's just a little bit too high for what you get in the vehicle compared to some of the other value entries in this segment. Now that said, the math for 2018 could be a little bit different because we will be seeing that new twin-turbo V8 engine under the hood in the Cadillac CT6. We also will have a much more expensive Lexus LS, which should mean that the CT6 will be an even better deal than it is in 2017. Although this may sound very conflicted, my personal top pick in this segment would again be the Genesis G90, but my second pick would be the CT6. And I realize that sounds strange because they're not quite the same kind of vehicle, but I like both vehicles for very different reasons. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. Again, I'm Alex Dykes, and that has been the 2017 Cadillac CT6. Be sure and click the subscribe button down there so you can be updated on all of our latest videos. Check out those related videos on the side of your screen. You can find us over at patreon.com if you want to support this channel, and definitely like us over at facebook.com/AlexNautos. I'll see you next week.